Most people noticed the man on the ground, but nobody stopped. He looked exhausted, scared, and completely alone, clutching his jacket like it was the only thing keeping him together. A few people slowed down. Some whispered. Then they kept walking. What they didn't see was how close things were to getting worse. Nearby, tension was building. Voices rose. Someone stepped too close, and the man on the ground had nowhere to go. That was when a quiet stranger appeared. No shouting, no threats, just a calm presence that didn't belong in chaos. He positioned himself carefully, spoke only when necessary, and somehow, the situation began to unwind. People backed off. The danger passed. To everyone watching, he looked ordinary. Just another passerby who decided to help. But much later, after the crowd had gone, someone learned the truth. The man who stepped in had spent years training for moments exactly like that. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. They said no one cares about stories of discipline, courage, and service. If you do, subscribe and stand with this channel. I enjoy stories more when I imagine them myself, so that's how I tell mine. This story isn't just meant to be watched. It's meant to be imagined. His name was David Chun, and he was 23 years old. Just 2 hours earlier, he'd been riding the L train home from his night shift at a warehouse in Brooklyn when everything went wrong. The panic attack hit him somewhere between Bedford and First Avenue. Chest tight, breath shallow, the walls of the subway car pressing in like a vice. He'd stumbled off at the next stop, barely making it to the platform before his legs gave out. Now he sat against the tiled wall of the 6th Avenue station, jacket pulled tight around his shoulders, trying to remember how to breathe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Thousands of footsteps echoed past. Nobody stopped. David had been dealing with anxiety for years, ever since his father died, but it had never been this bad. Never this public. Never this terrifying. He wanted to call someone. His sister, his roommate, anyone, but his phone was dead, and the thought of standing up, of walking, of doing anything felt impossible. A woman in a business suit glanced at him, her expression flickering between concern and discomfort. She slowed for half a second, then pulled out her phone and kept walking. A teenager with headphones looked right at him, then quickly looked away. An older man muttered something about kids these days and shuffled past. David understood. He'd probably done the same thing 100 times. The city taught you not to get involved, not to make someone else's crisis your own. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. It didn't make him feel less alone. What nobody saw, what David himself didn't fully realize, was that his situation was about to get much worse. About 15 feet away, near the stairs leading up to street level, 2 men were arguing. Their voices were getting louder. One of them was drunk, swaying slightly, jabbing his finger into the other man's chest. The second man, younger, wearing a Nets jersey, wasn't backing down. "Touch me again, see what happens." His hand moved to his waistband. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. The crowd shifted nervously. People created space, that invisible radius of "please don't involve me" expanding outward. The drunk man stumbled backward, directly toward where David sat frozen against the wall. David saw him coming, but couldn't move. His body wouldn't respond. The panic had him locked in place, every muscle rigid, breath coming in shallow gasps. The drunk man tripped over David's outstretched leg and went down hard, cursing. "The hell, man." He scrambled to his feet, face red, anger redirecting. "You tripped me." David tried to speak, to apologize, but no words came out. Just a strangled sound that made him sound guilty, scared, weak. "I'm talking to you." The drunk man leaned down, close enough that David could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You think that's funny?" The guy in the Nets jersey saw an opportunity. "Yo, leave him alone." But his tone wasn't protective. It was antagonistic. He was moving closer, still angry, still looking for a target. Now David had both of them looming over him. The drunk man swaying and shouting. The younger guy tense and ready for violence. And David, pressed against the wall, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to do anything but wait for whatever came next. The crowd had backed up even further now. A few people had phones out, recording but not helping. A transit worker appeared at the far end of the platform, saw the situation, and immediately radioed for backup. But backup would take time. Minutes, maybe. And minutes felt like hours when you were the one on the ground. "Answer me." The drunk man reached down, grabbed David's jacket. David flinched hard. a full-body reaction that made him look even more vulnerable. That was when the quiet stranger stepped in. He appeared from the crowd so smoothly that nobody could later agree on where he'd come from. One moment the space was hostile and dangerous. The next, there was a man standing between David and the two aggressors. He was average height, maybe mid-30s, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. He didn't push anyone, didn't raise his voice. He simply positioned himself in the space, hands visible and open, and said, "Hey, give him some room." The drunk man blinked, confused by the interruption. This your friend? Doesn't need to be. The stranger's voice was calm, almost conversational. He's clearly not doing well. He's not a threat to you. So let's just step back and give him space. The guy in the Nets jersey wasn't having it. "Man, who asked you? This ain't your business." "It became my business when you two cornered someone who can't defend himself." The stranger shifted slightly, barely noticeable, but suddenly he was positioned where he could see both men clearly, where neither could move without him seeing. "I'm asking you both, politely, to step away." There was something in his tone, something in the absolute stillness of his posture. No aggression, no challenge, just complete certainty. It created a pause, a moment where the momentum of violence hesitated. The drunk man looked at the stranger, then at David, then back. His anger was fading, replaced by confusion. He tripped me. I know. Accidents happen." The stranger's voice stayed level. "But he's sitting on the ground having a medical issue. He didn't do it on purpose. You can see that, right?" The drunk man wavered. The stranger was giving him an out, a way to de-escalate without losing face. "Yeah, whatever." The drunk man stepped back, hands up. "I'm done." But the younger guy wasn't ready to let it go. "Nah, this is bull." He moved forward, trying to get around the stranger to reach David. The stranger moved too. Not fast, not aggressive, just a simple sidestep that put him back in the way, and something about that movement, the precision of it, the control, made the younger guy stop. "Think about what you're doing," the stranger said quietly. "There are cameras everywhere. Transit police are already on the way. You really want this to be how your day goes?" The guy in the Nets jersey stood there, jaw clenched, visibly calculating. Then he spat on the ground and walked away, muttering under his breath. The stranger watched him go, then turned to the drunk man. "You good?" "Yeah, I'm good." The drunk man nodded, suddenly sheepish, and wandered toward the stairs. Just like that, it was over. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, people returning to their commutes and their carefully constructed bubbles of not my problem. But a few remained. The transit worker who'd called for backup approached cautiously. "Everything okay here?" The stranger nodded. "Yeah, just a misunderstanding. This guy needs medical attention, though." He gestured to David, who was still against the wall, still struggling to breathe. The transit worker knelt down. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me? Do you need an ambulance?" David managed to shake his head. Not an ambulance. He couldn't afford an ambulance. "Just panic attack," he gasped out. "I just need a minute." The stranger crouched down too, keeping his distance, giving David space. "You're okay. You're safe now. Nobody's going to bother you. Just focus on breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You've got time." His voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, that David found himself listening, following the instruction, breathing. The tight band around his chest began to loosen, just slightly. "That's it. You're doing good." A woman from the crowd stepped forward, the same businesswoman who'd walked past earlier. Now, with the danger gone, she felt safe enough to help. "Does he need water?" "I have water." "That would be great," the stranger said. "Thank you." She handed over a bottle. The stranger opened it and held it where David could reach. Small sips. "Take your time." David drank. The water helped. The breathing exercises helped. The presence of someone calm and certain helped most of all. Slowly, minute by minute, the panic began to recede. But then a Metro North police officer arrived, summoned by the transit worker's earlier call. He took one look at the scene. David on the ground, the stranger crouched beside him, the small crowd, and his hand moved to his belt. "What's going on here?" The transit worker explained quickly. The misunderstanding, the de-escalation, the medical issue. But the officer was focused on the stranger now. "ID, please." The stranger stood slowly, reaching for his wallet. "Sure. You involved in the altercation?" "I helped stop it." "That's not what I asked." The officer's tone had sharpened. He was looking at the stranger differently now. At the hoodie, the calm demeanor, the way he'd inserted himself into a situation. Did you make physical contact with anyone? No contact. Just verbal de-escalation. Multiple witnesses say you blocked one of the individuals from. I positioned myself between an aggressor and someone having a medical emergency, the stranger said, still calm, still respectful, but with an edge now. No force was used. No threats were made. The situation was resolved peacefully. The businessman who'd been recording spoke up. He's telling the truth, officer. I got the whole thing on video. This guy defused everything. Those other two were about to hurt that kid. The officer hesitated. This wasn't the script he'd expected. He looked at David, still on the ground but breathing more normally now. Looked at the stranger, who met his gaze steadily. Looked at the small crowd, several of whom were nodding in agreement with the businessman. All right, but I need statements from everyone. It took 20 minutes. Questions, answers, contact information. The stranger answered everything patiently, never irritated, never rushed. When it was done, the officer handed back his ID. You former military? The stranger paused, then nodded once. Yeah, thought so. The officer's expression softened slightly. Thank you for your service. And for helping today. Then he left, and the crowd finally dispersed for real. David was sitting up now, back against the wall, but breathing normally. The stranger had stayed, even after the police left, even after everyone else had gone. He'd helped David charge his phone using a portable battery he had in his bag. He'd made sure David could stand, could walk. Thank you, David said, his voice hoarse. I don't know what would have happened if. You're okay. That's what matters. Can I at least know your name? The stranger hesitated, then smiled slightly. James Reeves. I'm David. David Chun. He extended his hand, and James shook it. You probably saved me today. I mean that. You would have been fine. I wouldn't have. David looked at him seriously. The way you handled that. Where did you learn to do that? James shrugged. Experience. That was all he said. Then he made sure David had his sister's number pulled up and ready to call, made sure he knew which train to take, and disappeared back into the flow of commuters like he'd never been there at all. David called his sister. Went home. Tried to process what had happened. It was 3 days later when he saw the news story. A local reporter had done a piece on subway safety, and in researching it, they'd obtained the businessman's video of the incident. The footage had been edited for a segment about Good Samaritans, and the reporter had done something David never thought to do. She'd looked up James Reeves. The man who intervened, the reporter's voice said over B-roll of the subway platform, initially declined to be interviewed. But public records show that James Reeves, 34, is a decorated former Navy SEAL who served 3 combat deployments before medically retiring last year. David sat frozen on his couch, remote in hand, staring at the screen. Only later did anyone realize the quiet stranger who stepped in had spent years as a Navy SEAL. David found James's email through a veterans advocacy group mentioned in the news piece. He sent a message, thanked him again, asked if they could meet for coffee. James responded 2 days later. You don't owe me anything, but sure. Coffee sounds good. They met at a diner in Manhattan on a Wednesday afternoon. James looked the same, jeans, hoodie, completely unremarkable. But David saw him differently now. Saw the careful way he chose his seat, back to the wall, facing the door. Saw the awareness in his eyes, always scanning, always assessing. You didn't tell me, David said after they'd ordered. Didn't seem relevant. How is that not relevant? I'm a guy who saw someone who needed help. James's voice was firm but kind. The rest is just background. They talked for over an hour. James told him about transitioning out of the military, about struggling to find purpose in civilian life, about how strange it felt to live in a world where most people weren't watching for threats all the time. David told him about his anxiety, about losing his father, about feeling like he was drowning most days. What you did that day, David said finally. The way you stayed calm when everything was chaos. How do you do that? James thought about it. Training helps. But honestly, I just remember that panic doesn't solve anything. Action does. Even small action. Just showing up, being present, doing what you can in the moment. That's usually enough. Is that what you did for me? Yeah, I showed up. David nodded slowly. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. I wanted to show you something. After that day, I started going to therapy. Real therapy, not just trying to handle it myself. And I started volunteering. He opened the folder. Inside were flyers for a crisis hotline training program. I'm training to be a hotline counselor. For people having panic attacks, mental health crises, people who feel alone. James looked at the materials, then at David. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. That's good work. You inspired me. The way you just stepped in when nobody else would. I want to be that person for someone else. They finished their coffee, exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch. And when David walked out of that diner, he walked differently. Shoulders back, head up, still anxious, still healing, but no longer alone. James watched him go, then paid the check and left. 2 weeks later, David got a text. Heard you finished your training. Congratulations. You're going to help a lot of people. He smiled and typed back. Learned from the best. 6 months after the incident, David was working his first solo shift on the crisis hotline when a call came in. A young woman, 17, calling from a subway platform. Panic attack. Couldn't breathe. Surrounded by people, but completely alone. David talked her through it. Breathing exercises. Calm voice. Steady presence. Exactly the way James had done for him. You're going to be okay, he told her. I promise. You're not alone. When the call ended, when she was safe, breathing normally, on her way home, David sat back in his chair and thought about that day on the platform. About the stranger who'd appeared when nobody else would. About how one moment of kindness could change everything. He never forgot James Reeves. And James, wherever he was, continued doing what he'd always done. Showing up, being present, helping where he could. No fanfare, no recognition. Just quiet action in a world that desperately needed it. Because that was what heroes actually looked like. Not loud, not flashy, just there when it mattered most.